opportunities to improve, and how do we get Rochester back to performing in its optimal fashion. So, without further ado, I want to just introduce this wonderful panel that we have here this morning, and they can introduce themselves to you. So first, let's start with Dr. Macpherson.
Good morning and welcome to the panel here. So my name is Heidi Macpherson. I am honored to serve as president of the College at Brockport. I'm also thrilled that the College at Brockport is the sponsoring campus for REOC, the Rochester Educational Opportunity Center. This is a most important part of our workforce development at every level, and we've been actively involved with the REOC since, for almost 50 years. I say almost because REOC has been available for 50 years, but it first was located with MCC. So we took it over a little bit later than that. I'm thrilled about that. At the College of Brockport, we have both undergraduate and graduate programs that offer opportunities for our students to be career ready. We have very strong professional programs that we are focusing on, and we're really looking forward to looking at some of the gaps that we see both in Rochester, Greater Rochester, and statewide around healthcare and other areas.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shaun Nelms. I am the superintendent of the East High Project. It is a school transformation initiative in partnership with the University of Rochester, who in 2014-15 was approached by the city school district and the state education department to assume responsibilities for East as a school and to model and create a model that would be the benchmark for taking schools that are low performing and to provide resources and access to things like workforce development and college, and to see what will it take to provide our students and their families and our teachers the right environment to have a successful school setting. At the time that we entered East, the graduation rate was trending towards 19%. 4 years later, that graduation rate reached nearly 70%. And I will tell you that it was due to the partnerships of folks like those in the chamber, the University of Rochester taking the lead, and the Greater Rochester community. So today we'll talk about some of those initiatives and how they impact not only college readiness, but also workforce development.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Joan Saab, and I have two related positions. I am a faculty member in the art history department at the University of Rochester, and I'm also the vice provost of academic affairs. And this is a pretty new position. I'm the first person to hold it, and it's been really, for somebody trained in a fairly rarefied field, art history, it's been really interesting for me to be in the central administration because the University of Rochester is an incredibly complex organism, and its tentacles reach large and far and wide. It's both a global institution, something like 20% of our undergraduates and up to 60% of our if you include our master's students, 60% of our students are international, but we're also the largest employer in Rochester, and I believe we're now the 5th largest private employer in New York State. So that balance between the local and the global and the professional and the liberal arts is a really, for me, exciting and interesting set of issues and challenges and opportunities, I think, to really explore, and I'm looking forward to talking about that with you all today.
Thank you all so much. And so without further ado, we just want to open it up. Does anyone have a question ready now for our panelists? So while you all are still waking up and brainstorming, I'll give the first one just to warm everybody up here. So you all kind of gave brief introductions into some of the things that you've done to help get you here. But let's talk about your institutions for just a moment. We are right now currently at the Greater Rochester Chamber, a part of a collective effort called Rock 2025, where the economic development community is coming together to see how can we enhance the economic viability of our region to attract various industries and employers to expand or relocate to Rochester. And that's a partnership between us, RDDC, GRE, the IDAs, you name it. And so we did a number of meetings over the summer for information gathering and fact-finding because we are the lead institution on the talent strategy. So I want to talk to each and every one of you about what are some of the efforts that you guys currently are undergoing to pipeline your graduates and your students into the world of work? Just talk to that for a moment.
Well, as I said, there's so many different schools at the University of Rochester that, and each school has its own institution, including the Memorial Art Gallery and this. Each one has its unique culture, and I think that one of the things that the entire institution is realizing is that a lot of our students come and then they leave. And so we want to make Rochester a place that they want to stay. And so I know that I'm working, and when I was chair of the art history department, we worked very hard to get internships and programs that our students could do here in Rochester. So they wouldn't go to New York, they wouldn't go to Chicago, because they would often come back here then and say, wow, things are so much better in Rochester, because there are networks that they can tap into immediately. In terms of faculty, we're trying to make sure that Rochester, when we're competing with, really interesting, because I can now see the data, of the number and I think that's because Rochester is a vibrant and interesting and livable city. Every city has weather, and once we get past that, we don't have hurricanes, we don't have earthquakes. I think we did have an earthquake, but it was so minor that I know we had an earthquake because I read it in the paper. But we are a vibrant community, and I think sometimes we're our own worst enemies because we don't sell what we have. And so I think getting students from their earliest days, we now have the hardest thing with getting students off campus initially at the University of Rochester was transportation. So, I was chair of the art history department. I wanted to bring my students to MAG. I couldn't get them there. So now we have buses, but we had to work with the city buses because it's a city bus that comes around. So those sorts of things that seem trivial and small, they make a huge effort. The number of students who have gone from the college to the Memorial Art Gallery in the last 2 years has nearly tripled. And part of that has to do with transportation and access. And that's a small example, but now it gets students off campus. It gets them into the neighborhood of the arts. It gets them going to Starry Nights for coffee or walking down East Ave. And so I think we need to break down that barrier between our institutions in the cities. And we're doing it for faculty. We're doing it for doctors and nurses, and many of whom are local. Many of whom have opportunities to leave. Some do, but I know a number of instances of people who left and then came back. But those are the stories that we need to repeat and tell, because otherwise people don't realize that other people may feel the same way they do about their location.
No, and I appreciate those points because just getting students off of campus help them integrate into the social fabric of our community and see that there's more than just professional opportunities and experiences that lead to a college graduate saying, this is where I want to call home, this is where I want to be, start my family and my career. Dr. Macpherson, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. First, I want to amplify one of the things that you said, Joan, about how we shouldn't be our own worst enemies. I went to a fantastic presentation by Matt Hurlbut, and he said the worst thing that we do is talk about the weather on our social media sites. And we've got to stop doing this because, like you said, weather is everywhere. And so if people are looking to relocate larger companies, we really have to amplify all the amazing things that we have in this area. We have fantastic roads. There are no such thing as traffic jams. And I know that people feel we have traffic jams in Rochester. You haven't lived anywhere else and we think we have traffic jams in Rochester, right? So there are many, many different things that we can all do as leaders in Rochester to start, well, we can stop doing. Let's stop talking about the weather unless we're embracing it in a beautiful way. But I also want to talk in two different ways because I have two different hats that I wear here in Rochester. I am the president of Suny Brockport, but I'm also the president of the Rochester Area Colleges Presidents Network. So I think that makes me either a president squared or a super president or something like that. I'm not quite sure. I'm still looking for the title. But I'm going to start with Brockport. We are very fortunate in Brockport that we can track 95,000 alum. And of those 95,000 alum, 37,000 have lived in greater Rochester area. So we really feel that we are doing an amazing job of getting people to Rochester and keeping them in Rochester. And we're very, very excited about that. 97% of our students are from New York State, so perhaps that's not surprising. That's actually something we're looking at, because we would like to be part of creating New Yorkers and going to other states and getting them to come and experience our area. But I think we're really excited about the opportunities that we have in Rochester. We also are doing a lot of work, both with our career services and with individual departments, and in our business school with their Success Center, to give students opportunities to have hands-on learning, real internship experiences, both with nonprofits, not-for-profits, and for businesses that are startups, sometimes businesses that have been going for quite some time. So we have a very intentional process for that. And I'm going to look up my phone here just for a second, because I took a picture of some data. And that's always a problem, then you have to get your eyes open as well. In our last first destination survey, of the students that completed that, 63% of them had some kind of internship placement. Now, not all students do this survey, so I can't tell you how many students overall do an internship, but we would love to have more and more of our students do that, because the more opportunities they have to practice their profession before they go out, the more they'll know, A, that is what they want to do, and B, getting an internship gives them an opportunity to try out their skills in front of an environment where they may actually get a job as a result. We have a number of areas where our students are always finding jobs prior to graduation. So our nursing students always have jobs prior to graduation. Our accounting students do. Our computing sciences students do. The students who do programs that have a less direct relationship to a position that, you know, accounting goes to be accountant. If there's a history major, may have a less direct route to a specific career. Those are the students that we're starting to work with even more to think about what we can do to help them be career ready. Putting my other hat on as the president of President Squared, we gather together as the 19 higher education institutions in the area, and we talk about what we can do collectively, because I think collective impact is something that we've been talking about in so many different forums. We had a great meeting with Matt Hurlbut, with Bob Duffy of the Chamber, with Vinny Esposito, to talk about what can we do together to create an opportunity for people to understand what the positions are after graduation, as well as internships, and how can we do that collectively. So we're working on a lot of different ideas. We've been working on putting together some websites. We've been trying to think about how we can collectively work together, because no one institution has all the answers, but together we can do a little bit more.
So my job is to get kids to University of Rochester and to Brockport, and to create a model. You know, Rochester is, I think, the third largest district in the state right now, and so we have a unique opportunity to create pathways, multiple pathways for our students into the industry, into the military, but also into college. And I will tell you that we often focus on the ills of the city school district, where the vast majority of those kids are educated. And I'm going to challenge this group as we think about improving standard, college standard, or even military standard in some cases, in terms of what students needed to be able to know and do when they leave high school. And so what you'll see at East now is a robust curriculum focused and anchored on those standards. And industry has helped guide us. University of Rochester has viewed this as a campus-wide project, not just a school education project. And so we work with the medical, URMC, with our medical lab, CTE, or urgent education pathway, where kids are engaging with doctors and medical residents. I was in a classroom yesterday with a fourth-year resident, and they were dissecting calf brains. Sorry about your breakfast. And that was a really interesting thing to watch the college students come in and actually engage with our students. They do this in a 4-week segment, so different residents will come in and deal with students on different medical careers. I see some partnerships from Optimax. They have really enhanced the work of our precision manufacturing. Flumine Institute at the university has helped us bolster our vision care program, where we produce over 1,000 pair of glasses for students for free throughout the community. Our kids actually make the glasses, and they fit the glasses, and they deliver those glasses to young children throughout the community. And the list goes on and on and on about the number of partners that we have. And this is not an agnostic project, meaning that it's not just University of Rochester. We have influence from Brockport, and from St. John Fisher, and Geneseo. And so again, I go back to what happened. What happened is that at some point, the business community went one way as the school district started to not produce enough graduates, At some point, the colleges stopped recruiting in the city for potential college students because of the performance of our students, and even the military stopped recruiting here. So what was left was a community of young kids with no pathway. And so what we are trying to do at East, and also at the Center for Urban Education Success, I serve as the director of that at the University of Rochester as faculty, we are documenting the process that has taken to transform the school and to move into the right direction. So my multiple hats are that as superintendent, but also the director of the research center, and we're looking forward to keep producing and giving the community more information about how we can be collective in our approach, but very strategic and honest about how we got here.
So you said something that was really interesting, Dr. Nelms, in your remarks about how it's time that we change the narrative and stop asking what's wrong with RCSD students and ask what has happened to RCSD students. And just one of the new conversations in the Chamber of Commerce world. So in addition to my role at the Greater Rochester Chamber, I have the privilege of 2 national fellowships, one through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, the other through the Association for Chamber of Commerce Executives, where I get the privilege of convening with Chamber of Commerce workforce developers and talent strategists and education advocates from all across the country to figure out what are proven methods, where are the thought leaders on some of these challenges and issues. And the idea of transferable skills has become a very prominent conversation right now in our community of how do we start to package and wrap some non-traditional subpopulations of the talent market to talk about the strengths that they have. So if it were a veteran, how do we talk about their commitment, their ability to act in pressure and to rise to the occasion, or a mother with children who has a much higher unemployment rate, but they have crisis management skills, they have people management skills, and how do we change the way we view folks and their value in the workplace? And is the conversation of transferable skills something that you guys are having at the P12 level? Is it something that you're having at the university level? Because it's something I can tell you that's going to come rolling down in the world of work pretty soon, of how do we start seeing people's value outside of the resume and their work experiences?
I can give you an example, not Rochester, but Syracuse. I was at a meeting recently, and they are doing exactly what you started by saying, is they have a military base nearby, and they are working with the state education department to do a micro-credential or credential for military vets to be able to, military vets to become teachers in that community. So they have a pipeline issue with recruiting teachers of color, and they have a base nearby that is has a large number of individuals who are experienced in the military, leaders in the military, who they believe they can help them think about the education career, work with the state to be able to provide a credential for them, kind of fast-track teaching certification, that they could rapidly increase the diversity in the workforce. More importantly, have leaders in those classrooms who have led in other environments, which would bring a different type of skill to those students as well. In Rochester, I would say that we are, as a district as a whole, we don't have that type of program yet, but I would say that we're trying to make sure our teachers understand those transferable skills of our students. And so we often take our students and say if they're not able to do things in a certain way, then they're not ready for college or college and career ready. We're saying that we are ignoring what the things they bring to the table that would make them best suited to be resilient in college, best suited to persist through adversity in college. I mean, I'll tell you, as a first-gen student, the things that stressed out my college roommates that they were freaking out about, I was laughable. I'm saying that's not real stress, And so I think that there are societal and social and also academic skills that kids in our city schools bring to the table that, quite frankly, colleges and workforce don't necessarily value or understand. So part of our process is to make sure that the universities, colleges, and the employers understand the true value of our students and what the assets they bring to the table. And that's trying to change the heart and minds of individuals, which takes a lot more time, but that only happens if those folks are in our schools engaging with our students. And so we've increased the number of individuals who actually who are in our schools, kind of the externships. They're coming into the schools to understand who our kids are as learners, as individuals, and hopefully we are changing some of the bias mindsets that some of those individuals have prior to meeting our youth and our families.
And even at the collegiate level, I know that for a lot of folks in industry, there's difficulty in understanding how a psychology major, how an English major, or how a history major might be able to apply some of their education, some of their skills in the world of work. And I often tell this story that at one of my convenings with ACCE, I had the privilege of meeting a quality engineer on a manufacturing floor who was an English major with a psychology minor, right? And so how are colleges going to be able, and this is a conversation that we'll definitely have on the side of industry to help them look outside the box and traditional measures and metrics to assess a person's ability to complete tasks and duties assigned with a job. But are you guys already trying to learn how do you communicate the message and the value of your students to employers as well?
First of all, as an English major, I have to say there are great opportunities for that. Sarah Mangelsdorf, U of R, is a psychology major, and Dina Porterfield is a music major. So there are lots of paths to the presidency, for one thing. But what I would say as well is that we recognize as we recruit students into the College of Brockport that we're looking for two things. We're looking for measures that show they have the ability to benefit. And you can look at test scores, and you can look at all sorts of different things that show that. But we actually know the most likely measure of their success is their motivation to do so. So that's part of what we try to work on as well, is that motivation to be successful, that motivation to power through when things are complex and difficult. Because when you get to college, it's not about staying where you are, it's about transforming to the best version of yourself, and it's about pushing yourself. I always say the most important question that we need to have our students ask is not how can I get an A in this class, but how can I learn in this class? What can I do to push myself? How can I learn more in this moment of uncomfortableness to get to the point where I'm going to be most successful? So at the College of Brockport, we do this in a number of different ways. We have our Saturday of Service program, which is compulsory for our first year students and which a number of our transfer students do as well. About 1,300 students every year will go out into the community, 60 different organizations, 60 plus organizations in Greater Rochester and Brockport to volunteer 4 years of their time with groups of students they've never met before. They get a chance to sign up for whatever it is they want to do. So they have some agency in saying, I want to go to the zoo to volunteer there. I often think they don't think very carefully about what they might be doing when they go to the zoo, but that's another story. Or they can go to churches or daycares or various places where they can do work together. Sometimes it's weeding, sometimes it's painting, sometimes it's arranging and organizing things. And we find that particular program has a profound impact on our students. Because from those 4 hours of volunteering, many of them will go back to those organizations and volunteer over and over again. They also have met people that they won't have necessarily met in the classroom because they may be different majors, or they haven't met in their living area because you might be in this residence hall or that residence hall. So it's an opportunity for us to connect students through some shared interest and then get them to move forward in other ways. So I'm excited about that. Another thing that we do for our students, we require students to live on campus the first 2 years, unless of course they're a commuter student. And over half of our incoming students now are part of living learning communities that can range anywhere from nursing intent or teacher intent programs, anything that's actually focused on a career, to what we call the explorers. And those are the students who haven't quite decided what they want to do, but they have an opportunity to say, what does this feel like? What does that feel like? For those who have an interest in, say, sustainability issues, social justice issues. So again, we find that our students persist at a greater rate when they have that opportunity to do some extracurricular and co-curricular work. And again, that's focusing on skills that are not just about what you do in composition class and what you do in algebra and what you do in those things, but it's about teamwork, it's about that kind of thing. The third thing, there's actually four, so I'll be real quick. The third thing is our leadership development program, which is an award-winning leadership development program. Students start with one-to-one mentors with faculty, staff, sometimes the president, and they sit down and talk about what it means to be a leader, how they want to develop their own leadership capacities, and where we can help them think through those ideas. It's a 4-year program. If they take all 4 years, they go from focusing on self to focusing on organizations, to focusing on community relations, to actually running a whole conference on leadership development in the final year. And we have been very intentional in ensuring that our underrepresented students are overrepresented in our leadership development program, because that's really, really important to us. And finally, we have, like most colleges, we have the APS class, which all students have to take, which is really basically getting them an academic planning seminar, getting them ready to be able to be successful in the classroom, getting them ready to think through things. And part of that, we do a common read program. Again, that's really common across institutions, but it's been very important for students to have some common intellectual background there where they can focus on things that are sometimes very complex. This particular year, our focus was on a book called, of course I'm going to forget the title.
Line Becomes a River.
The Line Becomes a River. This is why I have Dave with me wherever I go. And The Line Becomes a River focused on our southern border and what it meant for an individual who was a border patrol person, how that transformed his thinking about the world and what he did as an activist afterwards. And again, it raised questions, and that's the important thing. We're not about finding the answers, we're about raising the questions so that we can teach our students how to think through complex issues and hopefully how to have civil discourse even when there is a variety of opinions on the table.
We're doing many of those same things, and I want to respond to what both of you said, but in particular, Shaun, you said your job is to get students ready to go to Brockport, go to U of R, or go someplace else, and we have to be aware once the students get to colleges and universities, we need to help them stay there and become the best version of themselves, and we have to do it in such a way that they don't feel signaled out, and that they don't, and we have all sorts of programs at the university for first-generation students, for non-native speakers, for neuroatypical students. We have lots and lots of centers and programs that help students acclimate, adjust, and thrive. But I think that it's important to make sure that we don't silo these students, and so to make sure that they feel like they're part of a broader community and that they're talking to one another. Because there are days when I'm walking through the University of Rochester, has this tunnel system, you can walk through the tunnels, and you can hear a group of students speaking Mandarin. But it's better when you hear the students, the Chinese Mandarin native speakers speaking English to non-Chinese students. And so we need to find areas, and we have things like film clubs and things like that, but we also have other opportunities for students to get the support they need with others who may not be like them. Because I think that's one of the things at a university, and in order to have civil discourse, you have to introduce people to others who may be different from them, and they need to learn how to assimilate difference and thrive, but they also need to feel safe and supported, and they don't want to take somebody who's a first-generation student or a non-native speaker or an international student and just be like, oh, you're on your own. So these support systems and these nets are really important. Speaking to though how we deal with maybe art history students who want to go on the job market, we need to again flip the narrative and say, I work with so many pre-med students because what we do in art history is we look very closely at things, we make meaning of what we see, and then which is basically a diagnosis, and then we have to communicate it to somebody else. So we do programs with our pre-med students over at the Memorial Art Gallery where they'll go, because it's easier to talk about a painting than it is to talk about perhaps a pathology or a fatal disease, but getting people comfortable with talking about what it is they're seeing. And it's hard. I did this with a group of East High School students. We have a humanities center, and we did a program for high school students, and I brought them to the museum, and they were joking around, and they're like, that guy looks like he's drunk. It was it was called election night, and it's, if you want to go, you can see it. And I was like, he is drunk. Look, he's got a bottle of booze. What does that say about how seriously they're taking this election? And we had one of the greatest conversations I've ever had with a group of students around this, because some kid was being a wise Alec, and he thought, oh, this guy's drunk. But it ended up, rather than say, hey, behave, I said, yeah, I think you might be. Look, it says boo, this is wrong, whatever it said on it. So you have to meet students where they are, but also take them further.
So during your remarks, Heidi, you talked about helping kids raise questions. And hopefully you all are warmed up now, and you can raise some questions for our panel. I think we have one, please.
So Ida Joan from Starbridge. I'm not sure how warmed up I am, but I'll give it a start. So it's exciting to hear about all the wonderful things that are happening. It really is exciting. So my question is, so what's happening to prepare faculty and staff to receive, to work with these students who have different experiences. And so I'm talking about cultural competence. What are we doing, again, to prepare, like I said, faculty and staff to recognize and then articulate the value that these students bring. Their values may be different or appear to be different than those of the faculty and staff. So how do you embrace those students?
That's an excellent question. I'm going to jump in here. The College of Brockport has developed, we're in the second year of a diversity certificate that we're working with Brockport Central School District on, so that we have an opportunity to educate faculty at the school district and faculty and staff at the college together, including, in fact, we had people from our REOC that came along to that program last year as well as administrators. It's something that's gone well. They're looking at potentially expanding that to other areas, but that's one of the programs that we use there. We also have an incoming onboarding process for our faculty and our staff to talk about all sorts of ways in which our values of the college need to be reflected in their teaching practices and their student support and their student success practices. So that's part of what we're trying to achieve as well. And we've been talking about being very intentional in how we recruit to come to the College of Brockport. So in our recruiting materials, we are now looking at actually specifically saying things like the successful candidate will be somebody who has experience with or an understanding of working with underrepresented students. And we are being very intentional in how we're actually recruiting so that we can say these are the values that are actually really important to the College of Brockport. We've also this year invested institutional dollars in a diversity recruitment specialist. We had a small grant from Suny for a year and a half to bring that program to the college, and we've decided it's so important, we've decided to invest in it permanently so that that individual can help us as we are very intentional in our recruiting opportunities there too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say that, I'll just say, and I'll amplify, Heidi's point earlier. You have an amazing Chief Diversity Officer at Suny Brockport, and I say that not because I know him personally, but because I've watched him work. And he has truly taken, he's not from this area, but he's really taken the time to understand Rochester as a community. I mean, I've seen this guy at the barbershop. I've seen him present to a group of students throughout Monroe County. It's an event called Rock the Change, it's actually happening right now. And I'm headed there after this, where they're talking about anti-racism and racial relations, and he was a keynote there. And my daughter came home and said, "Damn it, this amazing guy." I'm like, "I'm the amazing guy you met." But she came home and like she was bragging about this guy, and how real he was, and how she thought, from that moment, thought about Brockport as a possible place to attend, because she said, "There's someone there who I know would have my back." And so I think the way in which businesses and universities make themselves outwardly appear to be fully inclusive is critical in students selecting where they go to work, where they go to be educated, and where they go to play. And I think that what I'm seeing in Rochester is a positive statement. What I see in Rochester is a more intentional effort for businesses and for universities and colleges to engage with the community and not simply create a system in which we're going to welcome you into our space. We want our space to reflect you. And so I think that has been a transformative process, not just at Brockport, but at the University of Rochester. I will be honest and say that University of Rochester, by its own mission, was a very inward-facing institution, and they're really trying to become more community-facing. The East Side Project has allowed them to understand the realities of urban life, the realities of urban schooling, and I know for the School of Education, we have transformed our entire curriculum to reflect and emphasis on equity, reflect an emphasis on truly embracing Meliora, our school model, while making it ever better. And we are doing things like right now we're in the middle of a book study of Ibram Kennedy's Step from the Beginning, which is a history, a chronicle of racism in America, how people are racialized. And that's not something that the university was doing years ago, because we were focused on folks who would fit into our model, not making sure our model is inclusive of those that we seek. And so that is a transformative process that I'm extremely happy to be a part of, but it's not just lip service anymore. You're actually seeing actionable steps. And again, University of Rochester has been great, as a great partner. I'm a faculty there, so I kind of wear both hats. But from the receiver end, the end user end of it, it's been incredible. And I'll just reinforce, Cephas Archie at Brockport is doing amazing work, unlike, I think, any chief diversity officer I've seen as of late functioning within this community.
So I'm going to echo what Shaun said and say there are some areas at the University of Rochester that are doing an exceptional job with this. I think Warner School is doing an outstanding job. I think the School of Nursing is doing some really innovative and important work, particularly with the affiliate hospitals in the Southern Tier. But I do think it's a challenge to get faculty. I mean, I run the faculty development programs in the Provost office, and we reach new faculty. We reach something we call future faculty, which are our best attended programs, and those are for junior faculty, new hires, as well as graduate students and postdocs. And I do something for emerging leaders. But the people who go to these are self-selected, and they're not required. And I've changed what we've done to focus on resources and problem solving and education. But there were a lot of faculty members who were not reaching with these programs. And I think that you may have a brilliant statistician or a brilliant composer or a brilliant surgeon or et cetera, who wants to just do their work and have students who they can teach, and they aren't interested, for lack of a better word, or generously prepared, I think, to deal with some of these things. I know that with this increase in international students, it brings a lot of really good things to the institution, but very few of the faculty are trained in English as a second language, and how do you read a paper by somebody who's not a native speaker? How do you read a paper? And it then puts a burden on the faculty. So we're building up support systems for the faculty and providing resources, but the challenge is getting people to go, because the people who go want to go. And I would say half of the faculty at least are excited about this. But some don't even know. I mean, they don't know what they don't know, because they are brilliant in what they do know. But what they do know may not be how to deal with difference, how to assimilate problems, So this is the challenge, and it's something that I'm trying to expand our programs, because initially they were just for incoming faculty, emerging leaders, and what we call future faculty. And people have been calling me, can I come to this? Can I do this? And we're starting a mentoring program, and this has been incredibly interesting, and I think it's going to be successful, because we're doing lots of different types of mentoring, because sometimes if you assign a mentor, then it's just part of your job. Sometimes the people who sign up to be mentors are not the people you want mentoring other people. And so but I do think everybody agrees that mentoring is crucial. So we're coming up with different forms of mentoring and spotlighting relationships that student, faculty, grad students, staff, faculty. I mean, we're modeling all sorts of these to say, what does a mentor look like? Who's your mentor? You might have a mentor network. And these sorts of things then create resources and communities that are both institutional and grassroots. And so I think supporting the faculty and allowing them to say, I may not know what this is, because we do have great turnout at a lot of these events, but we're not reaching the people I think that we need to reach a lot of times.
If I could just jump in, I think that's such an important point, so thank you. What I mean by that is, at the core of the institution has to lie your moral purpose and moral direction. And I think we often bring in these outside recruiters or officers, and then people come into the system, then the underbelly rears its ugly head, and people leave. Because they understand that once you get past the smiling face who got you there, you get past the 1 or 2 faculty members or co-workers who may invite you to the company party, when it's time for advancement, the underbelly surfaces. When it's time for a critical conversation about something that happened in the break room, then other conversations occur. So I think as we look at these attempts to diversify our workforce, diversify our colleges, and diversify our schools, we have to address the core that really runs the institution. And that's hard, especially with large colleges where you have multiple departments. It's even hard in education. When you have 200 teachers in a room, in a building, it's like 200 independent contractors. It can feel that way unless you create a core value. You express your core values and you align that to your policies, more importantly, and and then your practices. So I think that that's a challenge for all of us in this community. And I think it's easier. It could be a much easier challenge if we walk this process together. And so those who acknowledge it.
Acknowledge it. I think that, I mean, there's a lot of like, oh, we're all rainbows and ponies and unicorns and every sunshine. But I think sometimes taking the bad moments and, transparency, I think, is key.
And turn it into teachable.
And this is what we do. We're educators. We teach. And I think that if we sweep things under the rug or close the door, those skeletons are gonna fall out of the closet. And I think rather than try to bury things, I think say, hey, we've got a problem here. Let's have a conversation, a difficult conversation, a critical conversation about this, and hear from lots of people. And I think that is one way to model those types of problems solving.
So I think that stirred the room up. I have 3 questions. So let's start with Ann and then Ricky and then our guest over here.
Have any of you had discussions in your organizations about what's happening at Syracuse University and how it might come to you or how you would learn from what they're going through?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting because as part of Suny as well, the Suny system is convening all of its presidents the week after Thanksgiving to talk about civil discourse, to talk about protests, to talk about what to do when people come from the outside or the inside to disrupt and create chaos, and to challenge free speech, which of course is also a complex part of that. So yes, we've been having our own conversations within cabinet on my campus about what to do about people who come onto campus and who do various things, but also how we're helping our students create opportunities for everyone to feel safe. That is an ongoing conversation that is never going to end. Syracuse or Binghamton or any of the other places where there is unrest right now are just symptoms of something that we have to deal with all of the time. And so it may give us an impetus to have another conversation, but those conversations absolutely are ongoing.
I love it. And I love it not in the sense that it's caused a ripple effect, but I love that students are actually using their voice to force change. And often things occur because they've been silenced previously. And so I think, again, we're going to be honest about institutions and how we all, including myself, how we respond in real time to students and their families and the larger community around things that bother them. We often silence them, or we don't give an honest resolution to their concerns. And then when they finally rear and they finally come to the surface, then people try to have really quick fixes by throwing money at the problem. And I would say we're truly going to address the core. Back to my previous statement, we have to be purposeful and thoughtful about how we do that consistently throughout those interactions. At East, we have 3 school-wide norms. One is to be tenacious, to think purposefully, and to advocate for self and others. And so what we're using this Syracuse situation to remind our students, when you're being tenacious, when you're thinking purposely, when you're advocating for self and others, it may look like this. It doesn't have to look like this, but it may look like this type of discourse. And so we're using this as a teachable moment for our students, for them to use their voice and to not be silenced until there's a crisis.
Yeah, I was at the President's Cabinet on Wednesday, and this wasn't on the agenda, but it became the agenda. And I think we too are trying to use this as a teachable moment, but we also want to make sure that the students feel safe and supported. And one of the things that came to light is that bias, and we have lots of incidents, I'm not saying like everywhere, I mean, unfortunately this is the world we live in right now, and with social media, things spread very quickly. I heard about what was going on at Syracuse last week from when the Black Student Union at the U of R, which I follow on Facebook, wrote a statement of support. And 2 days later it was on the front page of the New York Times. But often these incidents don't make their way up the food chain. And so the president may not know, or the dean may not even know what's going on. So what we talked a lot about on Wednesday, was how to share this information and disseminate it, and to come up with a response that makes students feel safe, but also secure in their right to free speech. So that's the balance. That's the balance that you have to sort of walk, is between constitutional rights to say what you want and also being respectful and feeling safe, because we have a responsibility to our students, particularly our undergraduates, to keep them safe, and our graduates and our faculty and our staff. And a lot of the things that are happening in Syracuse are directed towards faculty as well. And our faculty members who are getting horrible, horrible letters. We had an incident last year where somebody, they were in a state across the country, sent faxes to every department's fax machine. We don't have fax machines anymore. They're set up, they're attached to our photocopiers. So these racist faxes went out, and every photocopier at the university got them. So the first person to go to the photocopier was confronted with these things, and it was a national thing. These are a lot of these, you know, the Syracuse Manifesto came from, you know, this was not local. These are national groups, and they're tapping in, and we're seeing more and more of this. On the right, on the left, in the middle, international students, they're tapped into these networks. And so how we deal with that and how we correct for misinformation, I think is something that we also have to, this is something else we address, because there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of rumor and there's a lot of speculation, and so we need to talk about that too. But like my colleagues up here, we're using it as a teachable moment, not just for the students, but for ourselves.
And to not ignore why students are responding the way they are. So they're not even so much responding to the manifesto. Many of the examples I'm bringing up are things that have occurred on campus over the last few years that have never been addressed. And so I think that I don't want the message to be that it's because of the manifesto, it's because of the hurt feelings that were never addressed. And so that's the learning experience that we're trying to take from this. This happens in K-12 schools too. There are kids who have been silenced for years. We had 3,000 suspensions at East the year before we came, for a population of 1,200 kids. And so we had nearly on any given day, a third of the population was suspended. And so when we interviewed our students to ask, how can we change this environment? They talked about the disrespect that they were receiving from the adults, at least they felt that way from the adults in the system, and how silenced they were. So we had to honor that. And so we brought in sort of practices, we trained everyone in that to give kids equal voice and adults voice. But that was a real concern for them. They didn't care about how much they learned. They were really focused on, we don't feel safe here with the adults and the amount of power that they have over us and our decision making and how we think. And so I think we have to be honest and say this Syracuse issue is not about the manifesto. It triggered that way, absolutely. But it's about students talking about being called the N-word by fraternities and being followed home and being slandered in bars downtown, and people get drunk saying hurtful things. Like, those things were never addressed. And so I think we're at the point now where we're being faced we're being forced to face, you know, someone said, I think Michael Jackson said, you know, the United States of amnesia, in that we quickly forget about things and continue to act as if things are fine for everyone. It's not.
And part of the complicating factors on a college campus, and I think on a school campus as well, is that when an issue happens and when someone has been found to have perpetrated that particular incident, it is not possible for the institution to be open about what happened to that individual person because of federal regulations and privacy. And that's probably the hardest message for our students to understand, because as human beings, we have a history of public executions for a reason. It released something in people to see things being, you know, when people had their heads chopped off or when people had public hangings. If you look back in history, there's a release that happens when you say somebody was found guilty and they've been punished, and I've seen them be punished. I'm not advocating for public execution, please say that. But I'm saying in history, there have been opportunities for people to have that expressed. The hardest part for our students is for us to say, yes, this has been taken care of, and they want to know what happened, and we are not able, through federal regulations, to say what happened to an individual. That's the hardest lesson, I think, for us to continue to have to create that teachable moment for our students too. So none of this is easy, and that's why we have to make sure we don't have United States of amnesia, and that we continue to address this as openly as we can.
I also think,
in the interest of time, really quick, I want to keep our remarks a little bit short because I want to get to as many questions as possible before we close out. But Mr. Frazier, you had a question, and we have one question over here as well.
Good morning. So my question is, again, in putting Rochester to work, what are we doing as far as the college community to integrate our rank and file teachers to be exposed? Because again, some of our longer term teachers may not know the job market, may not know what's going on in the colleges. And at the second part, what are we doing for our students? Because again, I look at student professional development to expose them before they even get to college, what's on campus and what opportunities, and to be able to interface with students.
That's a really big question. In terms of what the College of Brockport is doing for our students who are education students, we are looking to develop an urban education institute so that we are ensuring that as we're teaching students the pedagogy of how to teach English or math or history, we're also helping them understand the kind of environment and trauma-informed care and the number of different things that they'll face as teachers. For students are people, not just students. They are not just there to learn English or history or math. They're there in an environment of family, an environment of social networks, an environment that may or may not be positive for them. And as a teacher, they have to learn how to deal with a number of different things. So that's part of what we're trying to do, and that's just one part of the answer to the question, but I want to give my colleagues an opportunity.
I'm gonna let you, Shaun's in the School of Ed, so he can speak to our.
So we do a number of, we do a number of experiences with local teachers, not just in the city, but throughout the region. There's a center that's lead as Learning in the Digital Age, and we're trying to connect university and theory through use technology with some of our local teachers, so they can take the journey of understanding how to rethink how we support and address student needs through curriculum, instruction, and assessment. We are using the use technology to better understand who our communities are as individuals. So we have this cultural responsive practice kind of thread through there. We do a number of sessions for teachers around leadership. I host a few of those to our center. And so we make those opportunities available, but what I will say is that we have not done a good job of making those things more aligned in part of the district's strategic plan. So where I see a disconnect is a lot of these opportunities are available in the local schools, but there's not a direct pipeline between the teachers in those school systems or the unions in those school systems. And so those who want to go often attend, but it's the individuals who don't, who probably need to be there most, who aren't attending. So we have to find a more coordinated approach and way to ensure that all teachers have access to this type of learning, and working with the school district is going to be critical in that effort, and we are doing that with the new superintendent.
I'm not going to talk about teachers so much as I'm going to talk about education and the educating workforce. And I mentioned briefly some of the things that they're doing in the School of Nursing that are, I think, parallel to the question that you asked, in that the University of Rochester is working with the affiliate hospitals that are now part of the regional health map to bring the nurses up to, New York State has changed the requirement for nurses, and a lot of the nurses in the southern tier hospitals don't have the credentials that they're going to need to stay certified in New York State, and they don't have the same credentials as we do at Strong. And one of the things that is a mandate by the state and also by the U of R hospital system is that all of the nurses are at the same certification and level. And so we're working to provide the opportunities for nurses who want to be credentialed to use their U of R faculty or staff employee educational benefit to take classes. Many of them are these hybrid classes that are online that use their daily work as their clinical. So it allows for, it's a more flexible and I think pragmatic way of addressing something that could otherwise be a real hindrance. And I've been working with the School of Nursing because online education is part of my portfolio. And when I first found out, I was like, I'm in charge of online education, and I believe in sort of face-to-face exchange. The amount of exchange that goes on in these online forums is actually from what I'm hearing, greater than what happens often in the classroom. And the amount of time that the students get with their faculty members is more personal and intense. And so this program is working, I think, very, very well in our School of Nursing. And I know that it's a model we're trying to use for other areas at the university. So I think education may be a place to do it too. I know that our Warner School has more and more online programming that is reaching people who may not know what's going, as you said, may not be aware of changes. And it's a way to educate and excite and form community in non-traditional ways or in new technological ways.
And we'll take our last question.
I'm Kim Fisher. I work for Morgan Properties. I hire everything from college-educated people that work in our corporate office down to people that work in the field. And the field is where I have the biggest problem. So the non-college educated, more trade school educated kind of people, is this city or east working towards targeting those kind of professions? Because there's a huge need for hands-on HVAC guys, girls, things like that right now. It really doesn't seem to get focused on as much, and they're high-paying jobs that people are not going into.
Right, so I'll just quickly run through. We have 6 different career paths at East. We have vision care, which are the eyeglasses that are made. Precision optics, which is more associated with precision manufacturing. We have partners like Optimax and others. We have a teaching and learning institute. We have culinary, information technology, and medical careers. And so we are trying to make sure that the kids have a broad experience in terms of being employable if they choose not to go to college. We also have reintroduced the military into the school as an option also, as well as college. What I would say is when we first arrived, the only industries that were approaching us were those that were in trade skills or in positions where they didn't need a credential right after high school. And so we had to walk this really gentle balance that we weren't creating a pipeline just towards one industry. And so I said to them, we're going to emphasize the industries that are where students are in the field, as you said. We also want to make sure that those kids are being prepared to be the managers also. And so we would get people from culinary would come in and say, we need line cooks. And so we also want our kids to be restaurant managers. And so we have to be, that doesn't place a value on either of those ends of the continuum, but I think that it's dangerous when high schools prepare kids for only one end of the continuum. And so, right, that's not your, that's just for the audience, it's not for your question. And so, no, please don't think. So I'm just saying that that's been my gentle balance over the last 4 years, is to say we acknowledge that there are industries for all individuals by their choice. And for me to also focus on a standard that says, but we're not going to limit the choice. And so for some students who leave out of high school, I mean, they can make as much as a first-year teacher, if not more. And we are fully aware of that. But in the same sense, we have to make sure that we expose our kids to everything, but then give them the pathways to those careers that matter the most for them. So at their senior year and junior year, our kids are doing a ton of internships in the community. And the business partners, mostly led by Ruben Oskowitz, so I think he's also a chamber member. He's really working with us and Adrian as well, and making sure that we first identify the industries that have employment gaps, and then make sure our students are ready to enter into those spaces. So the chamber has been a great partner in this, and so has individual employers, but we do have to do a much better job of getting a bigger landscape with what's all out there. And I would love to talk afterwards about some of those opportunities that you have in Morgan.
If I could just jump in there briefly as well. The Rochester Educational Opportunities Center works with companies where there is a clear need and develops programs and certificates to help fulfill those needs as well. So if there is something that's that you find a gap for your employment, I would really want to lift up Roosevelt Marius, who is the most amazing executive director of the ROC. He is very interested in what we can do to help the Rochester community, particularly where there are gaps in employment opportunities, because ROC is all about lifting people up out of poverty, giving them short-term certificates. The longest certificate we have is the LPN, which is almost a year, but the rest are much smaller, shorter projects that will, but again, working directly with businesses on that. One of the projects that he started this year was CSEA test preparation, and that was because we discovered there's a need for people to take those civil service exams and to be able to get into a lot of the civil service positions. So we created a program. So wherever we see a gap, we do try to create a program for people who are looking to restart opportunities in their lives.
You know, we worked with MCC and they created a 13-week program that we had to employ them 1 day a week, and then they taught them a range of just maintenance, you know. And it worked out well, but keeping them there with only working 1 day a week was hard.
So I kind of just want to pose one more question because I thought we touched on a really important topic around diversity and inclusion, especially given that workplace culture is going to be a key factor moving forward into if employees want to actually stay in a job or not. I mean, to the work that all of you do, you train an employee to want to leave, but you treat them in a manner in which they don't want to. So if you can keep your answers super short, but to give our guests some parting information, as leaders, how do you lead in this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and bring your organizations and institutions along? We know when we bring up the question of change is, who wants change? Me. Who wants to change? Right? So how do you bring your institutions along with you for the journey? Really short, but.
So we recently came up with a vision statement, and it's goofy. It's Meliora, which is the university's motto, as an acrostic. And the A is accountability. And I think that you have to model it, and you have to hold yourself, and you have to hold the others around you accountable. And I think that, for me, is the most important thing. Transparency and accountability. You have to walk the walk, talk the talk, and hold everybody around you accountable.
And for our audience who don't know, Meliora means ever better.
Ever better, yes.
We're very clear and intentional in creating our new mission statement. The College of Brockport is an inclusive learning community that inspires excellence through growth, engagement, and transformation. And it was something that we did very, very intentionally. And each of the goals of our strategic plan has inclusion and diversity within it. We have metrics that we focus on. We have all sorts of operational goals for that. And we talk the values everywhere we go. That's really important. We create opportunities on our campus for affinity-based groups to come together and talk about what they need to be successful on our campus, and we raise that up and do more with the information that we receive.
I simply say by making sure that you are understanding the communities that you seek to serve and be diverse. Dr. Kendi was here this week. He came to speak about being an anti-racist, his new book, and he said something that I actually tweeted. I just found a typo in that tweet. But he said, if you know you are not something, then you must know what that something is. So if you know you are not something, then you must know what that something is. So if you are not inclusive, if you are not culturally competent, if you are not understanding of gender issues, like gender, so if you have to know what those things are. And so I think that introspection is first, and that means introspection for the company that you lead, or the college that you lead, or the high school that you run. And then you must seek to understand. And I think that's something that we have to do a better job of.
Give a hand for our panelists.